Hey guys, this is gimmick. Welcome to another Pokemon Trading Card Game History video. This time we're on to the final set of the 2016 Worlds format. We're only a few years out from modern day at this point, but still got a fair bit to go. 2 whole generations. By the time we're done with generation like 8 and getting into Paldea stuff, it's probably going to end up being Gen 10 at this rate. That's an exaggeration, but I mean, it's getting up there. We're on to Steam Siege, and this set is a lot smaller than some of the previous stuff, but it certainly has a lot of good Pokemon in there. There are very few actual trainer cards in here, but even there's some good impact stuff here as well. And this set, well, I mean, it's the last ride of stuff like Night March and whatnot, but there's certainly plenty of other things here to consider playing as well, so lots of fun to be had. Just before we get into the set proper, we do have a few promos from this. These are all from the blister packs for Steam Siege. I actually didn't know this artwork for Froakie was here as well, so, you know, the bubble Froakie's actually got a better artwork, which I think is kind of neat. I like the one by the pool as well, but this just seems so much more dynamic. The actual card that might be relevant here is the Azelf. I didn't even know this existed, to be totally honest with you, but it's a 70 HP basic, and for 1 psychic energy you put 2 damage counters on each of the opponent's Pokemon that already has any damage on it. Which is pretty cool exactly in this set, because we do have access to Fortress still, so until it rotates after this round, basically, we can have a thing to place a damage counter on each of the opponent's Pokemon when we evolve. It is Forest of Giant Plants compatible as well. Then we just get a bunch of damage off on this, and there is actually a payout for that sort of thing within this set as well in the Spirit Team. So there's a cool little setup that we might be able to take advantage of there. Seems kind of neat. As far as the actual set, like saying, there's not a lot of trainer cards in here, so let's just go over most of those. First, there's a reprint of the Gardevoir Spirit Link because there's a different Mega Gardevoir in this set. Other than that, nothing too fancy. Steelix is the other Mega that we have. That's kind of cool. We'll get to that as we go. We have a couple of fossils. They don't matter because the fossils here are absolutely awful, so nobody is going to care about that. What we do care about, though, is stuff like this. Captivating Pokebuff. It's Erica's Perfume, I believe it was, in the Gym Heroes or Gym Challenge, whichever one it was. Opponent reveals the hand, and you put any number of basic Pokemon you find there onto the bench. An absolute butt of a move to do. This means if you place like a Shaman down or something, they cannot actually gain benefit from that. And you force them to bench stuff they don't necessarily want to bench, which can benefit you if you go for like damage counter spreading, like with the Azelf, but also just to deny them the abilities as well, and sometimes deny them extra cards that they want to discard for like an Ultra Ball to get into the game again. So very disruptive card. Super annoying to have around, but it's also not one you're going to see very often because it's like the 67th card in a deck or something. Very difficult to actually fit this sort of thing in and take advantage of it too. Most of the time it's like if you're just playing it for the sake of playing it, probably not very good. Just like Greedy Dice over here, definitely not good. If you take this as a face down prize card, that's the only time you can play it, but if you do play it, you flip a coin, and if heads, you take an additional prize card. It is theoretically possible to win the game in 1 turn by placing all of the, like picking up all of these out of your prizes, and flipping a bunch of heads. Never gonna happen, but it is technically possible. Yeah, this card's really bad. We don't have anything at the moment that like manipulates your prize cards, so you can never really know that it's there. It specifically has to be taken as a face down prize card, so if you do play Town Map, then that does not let you flip, work with the Greedy Dice, so that's really bad. And it's a literal do nothing card. You are not even allowed to play the card in, just to get rid of it out of the hand if it is in your hand, so it's really, really, really bad. What isn't bad though is Ninja Boy. Those who have either like played during the old formats or have seen stuff from it might recognize this effect as effectively Swoop Teleported from Generation 3. You choose one of your basic Pokemon in play, you then search your deck for a basic Pokemon and switch it with that Pokemon. Any attached cards, damage counters, special conditions, turns in play and other effects still remain on that new Pokemon. First one gets shuffled into the deck. It used to get discarded, but this also used to be an item card. So yeah, it's really, really good. This lets you, say, turn a Shaman that you've used into a different basic Pokemon, and the Shaman gets shuffled back into the deck so you can search it out later. It's really good. Also very good for stuff like Hooper, of course. And because it keeps turns in play in check as well, this means that Shaman that was in play the previous turn could turn into, say, a Gardevoir, which could then Mega Evolve on the same turn. It means it's a lot nicer to play like a Spirit Link down on just a random basic, because that Spirit Link will stay on the card that you're shifting to. So yeah, very, very cool concept on this. It does get used a couple of times. It is a very nice card to have around. Speaking of, Pokemon Ranger is a card that we've been missing for quite a while, to be honest. This would be really good into what I was playing against at the end of last round with the Jolteon and Glaceon stuff. Remove all effects of attacks on each player and his or her Pokemon. So that might not sound like it does anything, but a couple of obvious examples: the Jolteon, Glaceon with their Flash and Crystal Rays respectively prevent them from taking any damage from basic and evolution Pokemon respectively. Those effects kind of just go away. So you can say play Ranger on the Glaceon that did Crystal Ray, and then attack it with a Mega Evolution and do damage to it in the same turn. The other big one, which is admittedly rotating but is really good right now, is Seismitoad. This is why I wish we had this earlier in the format, because Quaking Punch, that effect disappears with this. It's one of those things that you usually can't get rid of stuff like that, but with this it's very easy to do. One last example, Jirachi's immunity with Stardust. You could remove that just to be able to delete that thing from existence, because man, is it annoying to play around that. The last of the item cards here is an item this time around, is Special Charge. Another one that I kind of thought was earlier in the format for some reason. This is a spiritual successor to Energy Charge in the Neo Genesis, and later on there was like a Gen 3 print of it as well. Shuffle 2 special energy cards and you discard pile into your deck. Used to take a coin flip, but just like Energy Retrieval, it has had its stipulation removed. So, very good card at this point. You'll often see it in decks that are like the 4 DCE only type decks, and it works out pretty well. As far as the Pokemon go, we're going to start on the grass side with the Yanmega line, because this is a very consistent, it's like a very flexible performer as well. Yanmega has the Sonic Vision ability, so we're playing very similarly to how Yanmega Prime played here, in the fact that your attacks can cost nothing once one condition has been met. And the condition this time is not to match the opponent's hand size, but to have exactly 4 cards in your hand. Not too difficult to achieve, to be honest. Judge is in format and that does that immediately, but also just play a couple, you know, decks as they are at the moment, you can play a couple of cards after a Shaman gets played, or, you know, play Octillery or something, I guess, and just play like 1 extra card out of it. Not too difficult to do, but it doesn't really matter if the attacks aren't worth anything. So are the attacks any good? Well, its first one is fine. Assault Boom, they're both triple colorless, because, spoilers, it's got a break as well. It does 50 for triple colorless, but if the opponent's active has a tool attached to it, it does 70 more. So, kind of alright. If you're hitting for weakness, then, you know, 100's respectable. If they have a tool on them, it's 120, that's not too bad. Right now we have Muscle Band as well, that could make it 140, so that's respectable enough. And 120 is enough to take out Shaman, which is a bit more than I can say for Barrier Break, unfortunately. The Breaks move for the same triple colors does 100, but it's not affected by weakness or resistance, or any other effects on the opponent's active Pokemon. This can hit through Glaceon by itself, which is interesting. The base form is 110 HP, same as what the Prime used to do, and the Break evolution is 140, so that's respectable enough. And it's a zero retreat guy. Unfortunately, the armor's not zero retreat, but you can't have everything, I suppose. And yeah, really good card. Watch out for Garbodor though. Definitely got to play some outs for that. There is a Shiftry in here, and the main reason to note this is because this is like the one and only set that has dual type Pokemon in it. I don't know why they didn't follow on with this mechanic, and it's kind of fun because they're all shiny Pokemon as well. But yeah, Shiftry is just grass and dark type in this form, and it really looks cool too when you see the way the card is like cut in half, basically, diagonally cut in half, and yeah, the 2 different types sort of overlaps, really nice. As far as shift rate itself, it's not amazing. It's 140 HP stage 2. It does take DCE for its main attack. If you can match the opponent's hand size, it does 120 for that DCE. That's fine. It's just maybe not the best on a stage 2. Its weakness hitting, that's probably the main thing you want off of a dual type. Dark is not amazing to hit, to be honest. It's only really Trevenant, and Trevenant is going to stop this from even coming into play pretty much. And Grass type is good, but we've got better Grass types, I think, for hitting weakness. So, I don't know. It does have, in this set before it rotates, it does have the other shiftery that you could pair it with as a draw engine, but I don't think we're playing Delphox style decks with this. It's just not strong enough. There's a very funny fungus over here that if you put it onto your bench from your hand, you can put 3 Pokeballs specifically from your discard pile into your hand. So you have to play the original Pokeball for this to work, which of course is on a coin flip, so it's not an amazing card, but it is extremely funny, and you know, you could play it just because of the memes. The Amoonguss doesn't do anything, so unfortunately I'm not going to bother with that. We have a Grass Larvester here, which is relevant for Forest of Giant Plants, but it's also just extremely unusual, because most of the time you only ever see Fire for this thing, and it's because Volcarona is dual Fire and Grass type. It's not amazing. Triple Colors to do 120, discard all energy on this Pokemon. All energy on this thing is pretty rough for a free energy guy. We were theorizing that maybe you could play it in Magnezone, but would you really? I think I'd rather just play Lugia Break, to be honest. But I guess Fire and Grass is kind of nice to hit, so maybe it's okay, but it seems a bit weak to me. Artwork appreciation for the Ponyta. Oh, well, I guess it is a horse, so being in the stable, it's going to make the hay catch fire in there, though, so I don't know if that's really great for it. Obviously, Rapidash, no good, as usual. There's the Chimchar line in here, and the Infernape is actually kind of interesting, if nothing else, because it's an amalgam of the original Infernape and the Level X that was in the first set as well. So that's pretty cool, like Diamond Pearl base set thing. It's got Flare Blitz for 120 for 2 fire energy, discard all fire on this Pokemon. Very similar, it used to do 90, so it's kind of scaled up a little bit, but very similar to the original Infernape that way. And then the Level X attack, Flare Up, comes in here as well, but now it does 200 damage. For 2 fire energy, 200, and if you don't have at least 10 fire energy in your discard pile, it does nothing, because you have to shuffle 10 fire energy from your discard into your deck. I'm pretty sure it used to be 8 was the stipulation, so even that bit's gone up. Yeah, the only use I could even see with this is if you could somehow get it into play in a Typhlosion deck, because Typhlosion's going to mill with Eruption and do all the fun stuff there, but there is absolutely no hope that you can do that in this generation. So, yeah, not a good card, but very fun, and a nice nod if nothing else, so I like the reference. There's a Talonflame in this set, but we've had tons of Talonflame in the past as well, so the break could be played with other stuff. It's a 170 HP fire type here, and Flare Blitz lets you do 150 for 2 fire, same energy cost as the Infernape, but it does more damage because it's a break evolution. Still going to discard all the fire though, and well, I have seen, I think it was exactly the Typhlosion deck actually that played one copy of this potentially, because you play it a lot, you play it because you have to play the Talonflame in that deck to make it work. And so you might as well play one of the break. It's not the worst card in the world for that deck. It's a lot of damage output for not a lot of investment. So yeah. You only ever get to play one Talonflame in that deck though. We'll see why later on. So you only want one break. There is a Pyro line in here. The Pyro line itself is not very good, but I do like the artwork on this. It's definitely Pride of the Lions over here, right? With I don't know why Braviary's there though. Lions aren't exactly associated with eagles, but whatever. Not a very good card, but the artwork's cool. There is a break which would work with the old Pyro. That's just not really a great thing anymore, because yeah, that ability is disruptive, but not for most decks at this point. The Pyro, it's a shame, because if this came out earlier, it would have solved a lot of that Pyro's issues. Kaiser Tackle for 2 fire and a colorless does 180 damage, which is insanely good numbers actually, but it does do 50 to itself, so you probably got to play Protection Cube on this thing as well. But yeah, the big problem with Pyro was low damage output, and this definitely solves that. You can kill all of the other non-mega evolutions and stuff in format with this. So yeah, 160 HP as well. It bumps it up by 50, I think it is. Yeah, it's big boy. So if Pyro was more relevant, like if this came out about 4 sets ago, probably could have seen play, but it's just too late at this point. Now, the main fire archetype in this thing is Volcanion, and respectively Volcanion EX as well. Volcanion EX is the main one here. It's dual fire water type, which is very annoying for the mirror because it means that Volcanion EX hits itself for weakness, which is super irritating because it also one-shots itself. It is heavy ball searchable. Actually, the regular Volcanion is not. But yeah, you can heavy ball search it. You could dive ball search it as well, though. That might be a bit more relevant. Depends what you're playing as any extras that you play here. It mostly is the fire type stuff you'd be working with, though, because Steam Up lets you discard a fire energy for once per turn. And if you do that, your basic fire Pokemon do 30 more damage this turn to the opponent's active. Woof. Yeah, so it not only benefits from having a ton of fire energy around, so you can, you know, do all of the fun blacksmith stuff this set until that rotates, but it also gets more power, which is just wild. Volcanic Heat for does 150 damage to 2 fire and a colorless. It can't attack next turn, so that can be annoying, but we've got float stones, we've got all the fun stuff to get away. Escape rope is pretty good for this deck, so it's not that big of a deal. You might wonder though, with all that fire getting discarded, especially when Blacksmith rotates, does this deck still have anything that it can do? Because that's a lot of stuff to hit the discard. And, you know, you've still got to get free energy on this thing. How are you doing that without Blacksmith? You do that with a regular Volcanion. This 130 HP basic, just like Yveltal and Xerneas before it, accelerates energy on its first attack. For 1 fire energy, you do 20 damage, and do... basically you attach a fire energy from your discard pile to up to 2 of your bench Pokemon. They don't even have to be fire types, but they probably will be. Yeah, this gets buffed by Steam Up as well. Just... yeah, you're probably doing 80 damage with this and accelerating 2 fire in most turns. Absolutely silly. If you do get to Steam Artillery triple fire energy to do 100 flat damage, that's fine, because that gets buffed again by Steam Up. So you can do 130, 160, 100, and, you know, with a Fighting Fury belt, there's already enough to KO Shaman too. So yeah, this is a very straightforward, super aggro style deck that doesn't really need very much outside of just 4 of each of these guys and maybe a couple of Shaman, and it just gets going. It's actually kind of insane. You can also play this with stuff like Entei from before as well, whose damage output was good, but this just makes it stellar. So yeah, really fun stuff there. Unfortunately, none of the water types in this set are any good. Gastrodon at least looks really cool. Artwork appreciation as always. I love it when you get to see like both versions of Pokemon like this. So I'm really glad that's the direction they took for it. Samurott gets a card. It KOs the opponent if the Ultimate Blade reduces the Pokemon down to like 60 or less HP, which is, I guess, kind of neat. It's like pseudo damage at that point. 40 damage to 2 energy on the stage 2 is pretty bad though, so whatever. And then there is a Chloritza in here that's kind of neat. Lets you accelerate special energy to one of your Mega Evolution Pokemon from the hand. That's cool, but I mean, Mega Ray could technically use it. Seems kind of bad though. And the Chloritza Break is a very weird, like, just boost its damage output next turn sort of thing. It's terrible. Stops the opponent retreating for 1 energy and then makes your next attack do 120 more damage to it. Sure, but like, how? It's just so bad for what it's doing. Electric types get 1 good card and 1 not so good. Ampharos is the not so good one. I love the concept of this, but it's so hard to use when if it was water type, this would probably be good. Once during your turn before you attack, you may put 3 damage counters on one of the opponent's Pokemon EX. So I guess if you get 2 of these in play, you could do a 2-shot on Shaman. But why would you play this over Greninja, which can just put damage counters on anything, right? Yeah, it takes a discard, but it's not that big of a deal. And its attack is really bad. It's yeah, it's still retreat cost is bad. It's still a stage 2. So it's not really going to win any awards anytime soon. Joltik has 0 retreat. I guess shoutouts to that. It's kind of neat. Actually, yeah, Pepper was wondering, was it Jimmy Ballard had the list that played the Garvantula stuff here. Didn't play Night March Joltik? I think that's why, because Night March Joltik has a retreat cost, I'm pretty sure. So, that's kind of neat. Anyway, Garvantula is what we're looking for here. This will actually see a little bit of play with what we're doing, what I want to do this round, because it's finally time for Rainbow Road to be a thing, and this is one of the cards you'll use for it. This level ball searchable, lightning and grass type, excellent weaknesses to hit in the format. And it's a relevant weakness stuff to hit too, because its attacks don't do a ton of damage, but they do very well at hitting weakness. Double Thread for 1 colorless energy does 30 damage to 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon, but you actually do apply weakness and resistance to those bench. So if you hit 2 Shaman, that's 60 to each of them, which is very good. And then Electro Web for a lightning energy does 30 and prevents the opponent retreating next turn. Cool. Good stuff. It's sometimes used as attack in Night March to beat other Night March stuff, because you can use it to KO a Joltik on the bench, which they're probably leaving on the bench because they'll be attacking with Mew via Joltik. So yeah, they'll have that on the bench, you can use it to knock it out. Kinda neat. So yeah, sometimes it is useful for that stuff. There's a Nido King in here that buffs your Nido Queen's damage, which there was that the Omega Barrage Nido Queen that attacked twice. Kinda cool, but how are you getting so many stage 2s in play, and they still need a bunch of energy as well. It's just really not very good. The Drifloon over here lets you shift a damage counter from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon, basically Meowstic EX, but as a, attack instead of an active ability. Drifblim, if you could power it up, would be super cool, because Burst Curse is actually really fun. Discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, put 8 damage counters on the opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. Exceptionally strong attack, but it costs double Psychic. And I have no idea how you do double Psychic cost in this format, because we just don't have acceleration for it. Really unfortunate, because I love this card, but it just doesn't do anything, so yeah. Anything that we can feasibly do, like stream with it, The Lampent, not Lampent, the Chandelure over here lets you attack for more damage for every supporter card that's in your discard pile, and the whole line is kind of based around the stuff there. Litwick can let you Battle Compressor 2 cards out of your deck. We do have Battle Compressor in the format still for this set as well. The Lampent then lets you draw a discard until you got 4 cards in hand. The opponent does the same thing, which is pretty fun, and the Chandelure itself can look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put one of them into hand, discard the other, basically an Acro Bike every turn. The problem is, it's 10 plus 10, so in order to get any relevant damage out of this, you have to minimum dump like 10 smaller cards, which means you probably have to play nearly double that to make it even reasonable. And supporter cards are good, but I don't think playing 20 of them is healthy in a stage 2 deck. It is Dimension Valley compatible, but again, like, how are you fitting all of the stuff in and actually making this a deck that is capable of getting its stuff out? The one thing I could say for it is that because it is a non-EX and whatnot, you can play Bridget to get all of your Lampent stuff out. Obviously Sycamore can discard things down. Misty's Determination, I guess, could be pretty reasonable. Like, there are cards you can use, but you've still got to fit the compressors, you've got to fit the candies, you've got to fit Dimension Valley, you've got to have some other attacker, because you're just not going to have enough stuff with this the whole time. Your hand being full of supporters means Shaman is pretty bad for the deck, because you're not going to be able to play enough cards down for it. It's just a mess. It's like Vespiquen, but like really, really bad. That's probably the best way of putting it. And it's even frail too. It's 130 HP. That's on the low side for stage 2s nowadays. Just depressing. What isn't quite as depressing though is the Hooper over here. This is 150 HP on the basics, so why is this stage 2? Whatever. Hyperspace Punch for 1 colorless energy is the attack that we're interested in here. 20 damage to 2 of the opponent's Pokemon. It's pretty good. I mean, you can hit the active for weakness if it's Psychic weak for whatever reason, but 20 damage to 2 bench for a single energy is pretty efficient. Especially if you do play this in a Psychic style deck. You could play this with Alakazam. to have stuff softened up, right? It's attacks for nothing if you play Dimension Valley down, so that's really cool. It does have a second attack, but it's triple psychic, so you're probably not setting this up. 130 damage, can't use that attack in the next turn, so okay. Decent enough. I like Hyperspace Punch. I think we could have some use for it. It's a single energy attack as well, so that's always really good. Unfortunately, none of the fighting types are any good, but I will make an anti-mention to Anorith because it's only restored Pokemon have no weakness, but when you evolve it, it's no longer a restored Pokemon, so oops. Yeah, you still have weakness on the evolution, and the evolution's terrible anyway. Croagunk is very funny because it lets you put more damage counters on poison Pokemon. That's cool, but I don't know how you're like setting it up more than once. It can be applied more than once, that's really neat, but how many turns are you going to be able to do that for? Just 0 is the answer because it's never going to be useful. The actual Toxicroak doesn't get damaged by poison Pokemon. That's pretty cool because you could use that with Ariados, but the actual damage output from it is non-existent, so yeah. Very cute moment for Sneasel over here. I'm not actually sure if this is the best Sneasel we'd have in format, but it's got an agility based attack, so it can't be that bad really. I don't think we've got a 70 HP one in format, so yeah. And Weavile's actually alright. It's a levelable searchable, and it's the return of Masquerain from Plasma Blast. As often as you like during your turn, you may put a Pokemon tool from one of your Pokemon into the hand. So, solid. It lets you reuse Spirit Links around. It could be very good for Alakazam actually, being able to use like a singular Spirit Link and just go, alright, Link, evolve, Devo Spray, pull the Link back, put it on the second Alakazam, Mega Evolve, get the, you know, all the damage down as you want. It could also be pretty good for other Mega decks with stuff like Shaman being able to take a Spirit Link, or, you know, being able to play a Spirit Link anywhere. Then play the Shaman, and later on Tearaway can let you take the Link off the Shaman, put it on your Mega Evolving Pokemon, and then go from there. And also, you could then just pull the Spirit Link back off so you can play a better tool as well. It's not too bad. Yeah, that's the most of it. It would have been pretty fun for being an anti-Headringer and stuff like that as well, but we haven't really played Headringer in forever, so I guess it's not a big deal for us. Spiritomb is also interesting. I alluded to this with the Azelf earlier on, but I didn't even remember this card existed, to be honest. Damage play is very cool. For 1 dark and 1 colorless, this lets you move as many damage counters from the opponent's bench Pokemon to any of the opponent's other Pokemon in any way that you like. This includes their active actually, so you can move damage from bench to active to KO it. If you can spread enough damage counters, and there are ways of spreading quite a lot of damage counters, this is really solid. The catch is that it takes 2 energy, and Max Elixir is great, but it also takes Darkness specifically, so it's going to be a bit awkward. However, I have a kooky idea in my head brewing with this, because Dimension Valley Mew is a way that you could copy this and only have to pay a Darkness. That seems really cool, so I think there's a way that I might be able to take advantage of this, and it'll be very funny. The Bisharp in this set is dual Metal and Dark type. It's 100 HP unfortunately, not levelable or searchable, but that's fine. And it's got Retaliate, so if you ever need to hit for weakness on Metal and Dark stuff, this is a really good way of doing it. 30 damage for a colorless, but if one of your Pokemon was KO'd by damage last turn from the opponent's attack, 60 more. So the straight 90, the same as we've had from other Retaliates and stuff before, but this time it's for 1 colorless instead of a double colorless. Pretty good. Yeah, so we can very handily deal with most fairy types. You do have to hit weakness and then resistance on them because they resist dark, so that is kind of annoying, but it means you hit for like 160, which is most of the time going to be a one-shot on the main ones. And you can KO any Dark Weak stuff too. Very good against Trevenant, because it's not that difficult to get Bisharp going against Trev, so pretty solid there too. We do get reprints of the Veltor and Xerneas from the XY base set, so they will be staying in format until Sun and Moon happens, like Sun and Moon on, so until after 2018 format. They stay in for forever. I don't know what their obsession was, but whatever. Yveltal Break is something I'm actually super interested in though. because it goes to 150 HP, which is monstrous for a basic that's thingy there. Might only be like plus 20 or 30 depending on which one you play, but that's still ridiculously huge. And it has the Baleful Knight attack for 3 darkness energy, a little bit tricky to get going, but still possible. 120 damage, 30 to each of the opponent's bench that have any damage counters on them. Ooh, that starts getting really spicy. Yeah, it's a ton of damage output that you can get from this thing. You just need a little bit of spread capability as well, but the deck's already not the worst at that. You can certainly do some stuff with spread damage. Maybe it's not as straightforward for Dark decks to do that, but there's ways, right? We can always play some fun stuff with that. I might actually play Fortress with this too, because that'd be pretty good. Fortress is looking real nice this round, I'll be honest, for a lot of decks I want to play. On to the metal types, and there's a couple which are worthwhile here. Steelix is the funny meme deck for this round. It's very expensive to attack, but it can do a reasonable bit of damage. Wild Edge, not really the way you want to do that, mind you. 130, 20 to yourself for 4 energy is, I guess, fine in an evolving Pokemon, but still not that great. The main thing with Steelix is it takes a ton of colorless energy in its cost, because the Mega is dual fighting type. And that suddenly makes it a lot more enticing. For 1 metal and 4 colorless energy, Canyon Axe does 160 and 10 to each of the opponent's bench. So, on a 240 HP guy that is in fighting, kind of, and benefits some like strong energies or the fun stuff that way. It's heavy ball searchable as well across both parts of the line, that's kind of nice. Corinna can get you the Spirit Link, which is good. It can benefit from Carpink when you Mega Evolve it, but it can't benefit from Carpink when you don't Mega it, so that's the big disadvantage with it. It's neat. I don't know if it's, like, it's not good, but if it gets going, like, those are, again, 2 pretty good weaknesses to hit, especially fighting, so for sure you could do some fun stuff with that. Cobalion is the next one that's worth talking about. 120 HP, 1 Prizer, pretty solid. Quick Guard is actually not bad in the slightest though. It's straight agility for 1 metal energy, but if, well, kind of. It prevents all damage done from attacks by basic Pokemon during the opponent's next turn, so it's more like anti-March sort of stuff, I suppose, anti, like, you know, basic EX sort of thing. However, you can't Quick Guard in successive turns, so I think Pokemon Ranger actually removes that stipulation too. That's pretty funny. But Pokemon Ranger, if the opponent plays it, would also remove the immunity part, so meh. Revenge Blast is fine though. We've seen this on Shaman and stuff before. 30 damage for 2 metal energy, plus 30 for every prize the opponent's taken. So yeah, pretty good for Bronzong decks. Too bad Bronzong rotates after this set, but still, it's really good for that this round. So yeah, we'll spend a couple of sessions in this, so we'll have time to see this card in action. And we'll have time to see Magearna in action too, because yeah, Magearna actually gets its first cards and stuff right at this point. Just like Volcanion being at the end of Gen 6, we do finally have the like mythicals and stuff here. 160 HP, pretty frail, but only 1 retreat, pretty good. And its ability is mostly what it's played for. Sometimes it's attack too, but that's more after rotation here. Mystic Heart prevents all effects of the opponent's attacks except damage done to each of your Pokemon with metal energy on them. It does not remove existing effects, unfortunately, but if you have a metal energy down, this would prevent Jirachi Stardust is probably the biggest one. It prevents that from discarding your energy, and therefore Jirachi doesn't become immune to stuff, so that's pretty good. Soul Blaster is a take on Flare Cannon, where it does 120 damage for 1 metal and a double colorless, but during your next turn, Soul Blaster only does 60. If you move to the bench, or play Pokemon Ranger, this effect will be removed however, so pretty useful there. Fairy types get the couple of stuff here. I mean, apart, like Xerneas is also pretty good, being, you know, the same Xerneas from before. It does have a break evolution here as well though, just like Yveltal does. 150 HP and the Life Stream attack. For double fairy, this does 20 for all energy that you have on all of your Pokemon. this actually isn't just fairy energy, it includes double colorless and stuff like that as well. So you can play this in other deck types as well if you want, and have fairy as your like main acceleration core, but you can also have DCE's double dragon energy. Obviously would be fairy anyway, but that's the way that Pepper wants to look at this, is effectively like a Darkrai Giratina style thing, but with Xerneas instead. So we'll see how that goes. See if he catches on to the fact that you can use DCE with this thing as well. Onto the actual other fairy type of this set though, which I will look at, but might not play until next set after we get the added support for it. Gardevoir is getting a second EX, because why not, I suppose, I don't know. 170 HP, same as before. 2 retreat, same as before. It's fairy type, so it still has the same weakness resistance as before, but it has 2 different attacks this time. Link Blast for 1 fairy and a colorless does 30, but if the opponent and you have the same amount of energy attached, like the opponent's active and you, it does 70 more. So catch them on like the 2 energy turn and you'll do 100 for 2, which is pretty good. Luminous Blade, a little bit expensive for what Gardevoir needs here, but 2 fairy and a colorless, it does 120 this time and discards 1 energy on this Pokemon. Yeah, the original one only did 100 and it took triple fairy, so this one's maybe a bit more reasonable, I suppose, for what you'd want there. But you don't need free energy on Mega Gardevoir, so maybe it's not even that good, I don't know. 210 HP, dual fairy and psychic. So it's interesting because like you kind of want to play it this round because Dimension Valley is really good, but then you kind of don't because we don't have all of the support that makes this good yet. And it's weird to say, but it's mostly because Despair Ray is good at getting rid of Pokemon with coming into play powers. For 1 fairy and a colorless, you do 110 damage, and you discard as many of your benched Pokemon as you like. Super unique effect there, you very, very rarely get to see that. It only does 10 more damage for each bench Pokemon you discard this way, but the goal is that you get to discard your Hoopers, your Shaymins, your whatever, coming into play powers, right? And those are just bench sitters that don't generally do anything. So being able to, especially Shaymin, that's a 2 prize liability, get it off the bench, put it into the discard so that it's much harder for the opponent to like disrupt it or get it back, take 2 prizes and stuff. It's hitting for pretty good weaknesses. Psychic maybe not the best right now because most of the fighting types are like, ground based, so they're grass weak instead. But Psychic can still hit some stuff for weakness, and Fairy is still respectable because there are dragons and whatnot around which are still pretty strong. Yeah, this can't touch Giratina, but regular Gardevoir can. That's always been the strength of the pairing. And with it being Psychic type, Dimension Valley for this set is still possible too. So this can be a 1 energy attacker, and the key then is the efficiency rather than the raw damage output. 110 is still enough, so maybe you just play like Target Whistle, Lysander stuff a lot, and you just force the opponent's Shaymin to come out every turn. That is very possible. So yeah, there's a deck here. I don't know if it's good this round, but still possible. Final fairy type is Klefki, because I'm not mentioning the Azumarill because the dual typing is bad for what you need dual typing for, and its attacks are terrible, so sorry. It looks good though, but yeah, not a strong card. But Klefki on the other hand kind of is, and it's all for the ability. If it's on the bench, you may discard all cards attached to it and put it on one of your Pokemon as a tool card. It then prevents all damage done to that Pokemon by attacks from the opponent's Mega Evolution Pokemon, but it gets discarded at the end of the opponent's turn if it's attached as a tool. This is a card that you can play for Vespiquen and that sort of deck if you want, but it's just a general tech card. Next format, like for the next season, a Mega Rayquaza actually becomes quite popular, and this can be a pretty good tech against them, especially because for quite a while we don't have very solid tool removal either, especially not ones that Ray wants to play. So yeah, it's a respectable card, very odd one, but yeah, it's not terrible. Dragon types unfortunately don't really get very much in this set. There is a Hydreigon break. We technically still have the accelerate from discard Hydreigon from Phantom Forces. Never really went anywhere unfortunately. This would be a nice payout for it, but it's just too hard to get into play. We don't have the Delphox like draw style thing like that line does. We only have the acceleration thing, and that makes it extremely difficult to get this into play. It does do a lot of damage though. Psychic Double Dark and a Colorless for 150, but you have to discard 3 energy on this thing. That's kind of rough. Like Lugia only has to discard 2, and it's a basic instead of a stage 2 that gets the break. The plus side is this also does 50 damage to 2 of the opponent's bench Pokemon. So it's technically 250 damage when you go through all of it. That is really cool, but again, there are so many hoops to get this into play. It's just tough. 190 HP though, that is gigantic. And then Colorless gets 2 good cards to look at. We'll look at the worst one first so we can save for one of the best cards in the set till last, to be honest. Holucha is one of those cards you can play with Mega Gardevoir. It forces the opponent to switch. They do get the choice, but like when you bench it, this forces the opponent to switch their active of one of their bench. And that's pretty much all it does. It's very funny artwork on this one too. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So it's not something you want to stay in play. It has a retreat cost unlike the old Holucha, so that's pretty bad too. And yeah, you can discard it with Despair Ray. That's pretty much what you want for it. It is a colorless Pokemon, so I guess if you played like Winona or something, there is actually scope to play Winona in next format's version of Mega Gardy. So, you know, I don't think you would, but you could, because there's a bit of a colors contingent in the next set. Yeah, it's fine, but I don't know, it's maybe a bit low impact as far as effects go, but sometimes the opponent just Crystal Rays and you really need to be able to attack, and this is one way of doing that, so sure. Now, the best card for me in this set is Talonflame though. This is one of those unique Pokemon. I don't think we had one like this up until now, but there have been a couple of these that have come out during the history of the game. I think Luxray is the most recent one, actually. If this Pokemon is in your hand when setting up to play, you may put it face down as your active Pokemon. This stage 2 just lets you play one of them down as your active when you're setting up. Yeah, that's really cool. I think, I'd have to double check this, but I think the ruling is if you only have Talonflame and you don't have a basic, I'm pretty sure because you can play this as your active, you don't have to reshuffle, but I will have to double check that. I think at that point you can choose to, because it's like you may put it face down as your active. So yeah, Greninja I think is what Sai is gonna look at this round, at least for the first week of this. And Greninja is the biggest proponent of this card because it just lets you set up very easily. And the reason you'd even want to play it is because Aero Blitz is great. For a colorless, it does 40 damage and searches your deck for up to 2 cards, puts them into the hand. Any 2 cards. The Luxray that came out more recently was trainer cards, or item cards, not any 2. So, kind of wild. It also has 0 retreat, which is very nice for any deck you'd play it in. It's mostly played in stage 2 decks, because they don't have very many other Pokemon to play down. So, yeah, Typhlosion I'm going to be looking at as well, plays this a fair bit, because that's the reason I haven't even tried it before now, because it really wants this card around. You only ever get to play one of it, because it can only go as your active Pokemon, even if you open multiples of them, and you don't play Fletchling or anything like that to get it out afterwards. So, it's only ever a one-of in play, but man, that one-of is heckin' strong. So, yeah. That is the set in general. It's surprisingly dense when we get down to it. You wouldn't necessarily think with only 116 cards in it that there'd be a lot in here, but no, there is. Full arts are kind of neat in here too. We do have the special arts as well. Oh dear. That's never a good thing to hear going outside your window. Yeah, the full arts and stuff we have here, you know, Volcanion with Xerneas and Gardevoir in its emo phase, I suppose, with Yveltal. I don't exactly know what the symbolism for it is here, but they're both Mitsuhiro Arita cards. They are both absolutely gorgeous. So he is one of the best TCG artwork guys, and I will not hear anything to the contrary. Very cool stuff in this set. Honestly, for a world set, this is probably the one that best highlights it. Some very interesting cards to go in here, and there's some cards that will be very powerful for next format too, so lots of fun stuff to look at. I am personally most interested in the Yveltal, and I would be in Xerneas, but Pepper wants to play Xerneas. I am totally fine with that. But I'm very interested in the Yveltal. I'm interested in playing the Xerneas from the previous block. I think it's either Breakthrough or Breakpoint, I think it was in, which does more damage for every different type of Pokemon you have on your bench, because those work. That works with the dual typings of this set, so that's a very fun one to play. And yeah, I have some very kooky ideas building up with the Azelf and the Spiritomb here. So we've got some meme stuff to do in this set as well as the serious things. Obviously Volcanion is nice too, but I don't know if I have to play that personally. Because it's gonna show up, and it's not an overly complicated deck, so yeah, obviously Mega Gardevoir is something I'm interested in as well, but I am unsure whether or not it's worth playing that before rotation or not. Like, it's basically Dimension Valley versus what comes out in Evolutions. Is it worth it? I don't know yet, but I guess I'll be finding that out as I build. So, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you have found this interesting enough, and until next time, take care.